Hello everyone, welcome to Homemakers Radio. I'm Mrs. Sherman, and if you're new here, please click the link in the description box and go to the page on which I have embedded this post so you can see the pictures and read the summarization of what I have talked about to see if you really want to come and listen. And this is designed to help you get something done. If you need someone to listen to while you work, I have my favorites. I listen to audiobooks of different kinds, sometimes fiction, sometimes other things, and enjoy it so much. And so I have been reading to you from Stepping Heavenward by Mrs. E. Prentice, and apparently it was published or written in 1831, or it started in 1831. The diary of a young girl started in 1831. I am not sure about its publication. I know that it was written for young women to help them on their journey of good character, and it does the story in a diary form, which gives you ideas of how you might keep a journal or write a diary. And she records her ups and downs in life, her hard work, her somehow turning her temperament into something more refined. And so I have really been enjoying that. And a couple of times she made an entry that said that she had awakened feeling kind of off and discouraged. And I was thinking of, as I was reading that, how easy it is to wake up and feel discouraged before anything really has happened, to feel discouraged. And so I wanted to ask you to be sure to make your list and just include the simple things that help you to get ready. You have your prep, I call it prep, and all it is bathe and dress and do a few stretches, exercises, whatever you want to call it. Walk through the house, at least just walk through the house, get a cup of tea, make your list, and have some prayer and ask God to bless your efforts today and help you to get some of those things done on the list. I was also thinking about something in some of these other books, which I will be reading for you today. And one of the reasons that I use books is because I can read a paragraph and make a comment, and it gives me a start for something to talk about and bring in my own observations or my own experiences. And most books, even works of fiction, have an element of truth in them. Even Jane Austen's books have characters in them that I have met. I knew a Mr. Elton, and I knew a Miss. I'm trying to think what her name was. I've known all these people, and so it's easier to use those books as examples of personalities or situations in families and in the home, because they're fiction and it doesn't hurt anybody's feelings, and no one can suspect that you might be talking about them, which is easy to do. Even if you're using fiction, people can get pretty sensitive. And so I'll just read on some of my notes as to what I'm going to be talking to you about. And it's easy to wake up discouraged was the first thing that I noticed when I was reading that diary. It's easy to wake up discouraged. And the question that I had for all of you, even if you're not vital, even if you're 12 years old, what kind of older person are you? And the reason that I ask that bizarre question is that you're all older than someone else. And the Bible talks about the older people are supposed to show examples to the younger people. And just be someone that they would, because the younger ones will copy you, they will judge you, they will either dismiss you or they will embrace your life and your beliefs. So what kind of older person are you? And it's good to think about it, because if you're conscious of this from the time you're very young, then you realize you're going to have to continue to develop into this example and this older person. And I think that all of you are older than someone. Even if you're only 20, you have a couple of small children, you're still someone's older woman. You're the older woman in that family. And so as such, you need to go back and study Titus 2, where it talks about the older women teaching the younger women to be keepers at home. And what kind of older woman are you? And I wish that there had been a series of classes on this when I was younger, because it was in the day when people wanted to get away from home. Even the homemakers had to get away. They had to have their outings. They had to go to the mall. They had to, and I questioned whether this was really good for the children to take them on those excursions when they weren't they weren't learning experiences, and they also were not in their own home where they are comfortable. And when we were younger, back in the day, to go somewhere, our parents would take us to the beach or to the lake, or they would take us somewhere else, but it certainly was not ever shopping. As a matter of fact, our parents ordered their groceries, and they came in big case lots, and we had a shed next to the house that was like a store. You walk in and pick up a this and a that and bring it into the house. And also, if we did go to any kind of a store, shopping or anything, most of the time we got left in the car. Can you believe this? Big family. Most of the time we got left in the car. And so I really do think that children need to be raised in the home, free from worry and heavy responsibility, a happy, carefree childhood as much as possible, to be home and to make a familiar place for them. And so I want to continue with getting ready, because it is easy to be discouraged right as soon as you wake up. So that's why preparation is so important, because it makes you think a little bit while you're getting your hair ready, while you're getting dressed. Looking at yourself in the mirror makes you think a little bit about what kind of person you want to be, and how you can, because you are also growing. You know, people talk about parents and they're raising children, and the children are immature and the parents are supposed to be mature, but just remember, you are growing too. You are learning and you are changing in some ways, and so you're maturing also, and your children are, by having children, it matures you quite a bit. And if you're taking it as seriously as it should be. Now, every one of you is a caregiver. If you're a homemaker, you're staying home and you're guarding the home and guiding the home and making it a place that you want to be, then you're a caregiver. And there are so many more caregivers now than ever before. If you've ever been a caregiver, cared for your parents or your grandparents in their later days, you know that it is very taxing, very exhausting, and it not only takes away a lot of your physical energy, but your mental energy. And so this idea of self-care, which I often talk to my friend about, who's a personal caregiver and professional, she talks about self-care, and we have been sending, in our family, been sending packages back and forth to each other for self-care, because a homemaker is a caregiver. And I recently sent a box to my daughter that had a few things in it that were of the caregiving type, you know, a pair of socks, a book to read, some very special cookies with the recipe, and some, I'm trying to think what else was in there, some note paper and envelopes and things that didn't require that you did something as a chore, but absolutely just enjoyed it. And I think I might have also put in there a couple of other things that I can't even remember. I'll have to take a picture next time. But so you're a caregiver, and then part of your self-care then would be to allow yourself enough time to get yourself ready in the morning. And of course, if you have little children, that might be done in spurts. You know, I remember having a newborn, and I had to, and there was no one there to help me, and I had to get myself ready. So I took the bassinet into the bathroom, and I kept my eye on him the whole time that I was getting ready, brushing my teeth, getting dressed. He was asleep in his little bassinet, and so that way I didn't have to hurry or be worried if I heard anything. So I always kept my children as close as I could with me whenever possible. But a caregiver needs to have leisure time. And leisure time, let me tell you, there are a lot of things that we love to do, aren't there? And I know of people who loved art, or they love crochet, or they love something else, some other little interest, and that is leisure. But when they start feeling pressured by others to turn them into a market to earn money, that is no longer leisure, that is labor. So there's a big difference between leisure and labor. And sometimes you can burn out on the things that used to give you the most leisure because they were turned into a labor. And I've known of many people who have got caught in that trap by other people pushing them. Oh, you have such talent. You should make clothes for everyone and sell them. And pretty soon you've turned their home into an industry. And also, I was going to read to you something out of Linda Lichter's book where she had talked about that, on how there was a trend back in the 1950s to just turn the home into something that was more like a factory. You produced a lot of things, and it started way back in the 1800s in the Victorian times, and just took the luxury and the leisure out of living at home. So what we want to do as homemakers is, first of all, take some time to get yourself ready. And I know of several girls who were home, who decided that they did not want to go to work or to college, but they would stay home. They'd do their best at home to help their parents, and that was when they met their husbands. And I personally know of a girl who said, I don't want to go to college. Mom and Dad, save your money and just give it to me when I get married so I can have a house. And so that's what she did. She stayed home in her hometown. She said, I just want to stay in my little hometown. And that's what she did. And there's where she met her husband and got married. So it's like in that movie Princess Cut that I was telling you about the last couple of times, where the father was getting rather concerned because he said that the Bible says that the fathers give away their daughters in marriage. And he said, that's pretty hard to do when you don't know anybody that really knows what it's like to be a real man, a real husband. And his wife said, well, they're out there because look at you and me. We found each other. And so you might think there's no one out there, but if you will do as so many have, and determined you're going to be the Titus 2 woman, one of the problems with going to work is, if you're young and you're at home and you decide you want to work and you just love your job and everything, that a future husband might look at that as a necessary part of the living and insist that you keep working. And if he will want you to work before marriage, he might want you to work after marriage, and there might be a conflict there. But if he comes into your life knowing that you do not go out into the working world, and you don't, you were not going to accept anybody who has any other idea, then you're going to scare away the wrong ones and attract the right ones. And so I always say, I had a little saying here that I wrote down, and it was, dress right and be in the right place, and the wrong ones will be repelled, and the right ones will be magnetized. So, and then meeting, we talked about meeting the right person, and I wanted to talk a little bit first about this free to be a homemaker, because when you're free to be a homemaker, then you're free to have leisure, the things that you love to do, and you don't have to turn them into businesses to make a living for yourself. Because if you'll go back to the old ways where the good path is and walk in them, the Bible says, and there you will find rest for your souls. The old ways, not the old days, but the old ways. And it was talking about the way things that should be with the family and with the with life in general. And so if you'll go back and test that, Bible talks about, test me now in this to see if I will not pour out from the heavens a blessing that cannot be contained. you need to test out some of these beliefs. And certainly I know people who've said, I'm going to stay at home with my mom and dad, and I'm going to wait. And so I'll have a lot of young girls that will say, well, what am I supposed to do while I'm waiting to get married? Well, in the old days, we used to work on our home, we call them hope chests, but you could call them a home chest, and start looking at the sales and whatever you can afford, start filling that up. Start collecting the things you'd really like. You can't depend completely on your wedding showers that they give you, with all the things, the presents and stuff they give you. But I think that it's still wise to start a hope chest. And you can get books on this. There are many books. Go to Thrift Books, go to any of these other places, Abe Books, and there are some other stores you can go to online and look up how to fill a hope chest or the hope chest, and you'll find out what was in them back in the day. But of course that will have changed a little bit according to our needs today. But you could start filling up your hope chest. Now I know a girl who stayed home, but she was looking after her grandmothers, and she said that what she did is after she filled up her hope chest, she started buying her furniture. Yes, she'd see something she wanted, she'd buy it, but fortunately her parents had storage areas and she could put that in there, so that when she got married she had everything she needed and didn't have to depend on others or have to go and buy anything. And so you're a caregiver, you deserve to have some leisure at home. And I would like to talk a little bit more about this Princess Cut, because I discovered a few things in it, and I said before that they had covered a lot of information, and I had not realized it the first time that I read it, because I thought, oh, this is cute, and some of it was rather amusing. But one of the things was that that I didn't mention before was that if you're young and you're at home and you're wanting to get married someday, when you are interested in the right person, it shouldn't make you a cranky person, hard to live with, unhappy with your own family, that sort of thing. If you'll notice Grace in this movie, Princess Cut, she didn't realize, I don't think, how much stress this was putting her under, to be with the wrong people, the wrong men. She'd had several failures, and in hoping that she would find someone, and she began to be critical of her and sharp with her family, with her father and her mother, rather sharp, not wanting to linger and talk. And then she was very unkind to her brother. And so what I wanted to say about that is, if it's the right person, the right one will cause you to be more honoring. It'll cause you to be more at ease and happier and want to be with your family. And it should improve your character if you have the right one. However, in this situation, when Grace was dating one of these young men, it caused her to not quite tell the truth. She was starting to lie and treat her family like they were outsiders. And so, that's one sign that it's not the right one. And generally, if it's the right one, you will be more inclined to be kind. And so there were a couple of sayings in here that I caught the next time that I watched it. And these will alert you. And when her father was saying, I'm really concerned about you, I don't like some of these men you're going out with, and I want this Jared guy to come and talk to me. I want to meet him. And and Grace said, well, Dad, don't you trust me? And then she said, I'm not a child anymore. Well, those are two telltale phrases you need to watch out for. People will use those when they're headed on the downward slope. They will use those in a defense against the fact that they've already chosen the wrong way. And I wanted to warn you about that, because that's in there. everything in there was covered. At first I thought it was a little courtship story with an adventure in it, but of course there are also snags as they went along, and this couple met each other. And I was really interested in the man. I believe he was probably next door, and he had all his own career already set up, and yet he was just as honoring to the parents as though he was their son, and he could have been felt that he was on an equal level because he had his own car, his own career, and his own house, which he had bought. But he did refer to his parents in an honoring way, and he had had a previous girlfriend, and had his parents. He said to Mr. Anderson, "My parents asked me to break it off with her and put my life in a different direction, and so I did," which I thought was very honoring. And that is another sign that it's the wrong one for you. If the parents are not wholeheartedly enthusiastic over it and encouraging it, there might be a problem. And so the other thing was that when the father was looking through some books about, I don't know what the books were about, in his office, but his wife came in and said, "These look like good books." And he said, "Yes, the preacher had me look at them, and it's all about, meeting someone and how to identify if you're a good man and things like that." And he said to his sons later on, "I'm going to have to walk her down the aisle, and he better be a good man." And later on, when the good man came along and said, "I'd like to have your permission to get to know your daughter more, with the idea that we would one day be married." And he said, "You're a good man." So he had said that once before, he better be a good man. And then when he met this man, he said, "You're a good man." But she had brought other boyfriends home, and he had not said that to them. He couldn't even get them to sit down and talk to him. But apparently this was one of the secrets of winning his heart and his daughter's heart, was he would come in and talk to them. And there are two kinds of stress, ladies. There's the good stress that makes us have goals and do right and stick through something. And then there's the bad stress that makes us want to throw off all the cautions, and also that makes us cranky with other people. I would like to talk to you first, before I start reading to you, about something that you as a homemaker can protect yourself from. I talked before about something else, and I can't quite remember what it was, but it was similar to this. And I was thinking about it the other day. It just kind of hit my mind that I thought, about your independence, keeping your independence, driving yourself places, and not being dependent on other people, and independent of meetings. Now, what does this mean? Sometimes, and I've got experience from over the years of looking back and wondering, how did I get myself into that? And it all started with, "I want to meet with you." So you think, that's perfectly innocent, and you go somewhere else outside of your home, or maybe they come to your home, and the next thing you know, you've got caught in an embroglio of something that someone might want to talk to you about that you had no idea. But they're all prepared, and they have what they're going to say, and you don't know what to say. And always we were taught, I believe it was in schools, we might have been taught that, have a meeting with someone and learn to work things out in a meeting. But sometimes a meeting is a way of taking away your independence and your authority as a parent, as a mother, or just as a person over your own life, because someone might be coming along with a meeting to confront you about something that maybe none of their business. And I can remember one meeting I got into, and I didn't realize. Now what I do is I say, "Can this be done over the phone? What is it about?" Because in the old days, they wouldn't tell you what it was about. They'd come, they'd have something to say to you that was quite jolting and piercing and saddening, and they'd insult you, and then you had no defense, because you didn't know what the meeting was about. But now I always ask, well, what is it about? I can't meet with you unless I know what it is about. And then after you find out what it is about, you can decide whether or not you want to meet and talk about that. And it could be anything. And if it's something really, really serious, they ought to be able to tell you and not have to bring a group to talk to you. You ought to be able to just talk to someone and say yes or no to whatever it is they want. Sometimes they want you to join something. Sometimes they want you to do something or participate in something that they're doing. And so they want to meet with you. And I was not familiar with this. So in my early marriage, I would go to these meetings, or they would come to me or whatever, and there'd be people there, and they would recruit me into something that I probably shouldn't be doing because it was time consuming, and it was always something very nice. It was always something very Christian, but I didn't realize how much stress and time it would take, and even it could be costly. And so I had to be really, really careful. So be independent of meetings. If someone wants to meet with you, you might say, look at your little notebook and say, I can't fit it in, or tell me what it is, because, why would it take a meeting? Sometimes they want to get you in a business with them, and often these meetings are at night, and that's where it eliminated it for me, is no more meetings at night, no more meetings away from home, and anything that takes up an enormous amount of time. If my laundry's not done, if my meals aren't prepared, my dishes aren't done, if I'm behind in anything, if I've always wanted to get at this certain sewing project, I can't go to meetings. And it's hard because if you're a Christian and you're in a church, there's no end of people that want something or want to be meeting about something, and but your home has to come first, because Titus 2 is talking to women in the church. It's talking to Christian women. It's amazing how many are missing that their duty is to their home, to guide the home and guard the home. And if you're not there, you can't really guard it. And it's okay, if you have a nice husband that wants to is willing to stay with the kids and stuff, that still isn't good enough. The mother's presence is integral to raising children. And we can understand in emergencies why it might not always be possible, but in general, this little subject was be independent of meetings. And also, on the downside, you may never know when you're being called into a meeting where you might be trapped in some way, maybe questioned, and you don't know what it's all about, or you don't know what the questions are, and you're not prepared. So I used to wonder why some people escaped all that. No one ever called them for a meeting. No one ever said, I want to talk to you. But there are some people that just seem to be a target for that. Okay, so I thought maybe I had a few more things to say about this movie, Princess Cut, that I had observed. I think I've probably reached the end of that, and you're probably thankful for that. Well, that is... Oh, the other thing was that because he... remember I told you last time that the mother in this movie, Princess Cut, said she just had an uneasy feeling about this Jared person. Well, he turned up at the big harvest party, and he was very vengeful, and he had gotten together with the ex-girlfriend of this Clint, who had made an alliance with the Anderson family and was courting their daughter. And you see two very vengeful people that are determined to get their own way. And so that even in a good courtship, if there have been a relationship previous, and if they've had boyfriends and girlfriends before, you know that there is a history, and that history might come to become a problem. So that's why I say, if you're really young and you've never dated or had any kind of interest in anyone, just to keep it that way, so that you don't have a history, and that you don't have someone coming up in your life that is a big surprise. Like he said when he was talking to Mr. Anderson, I never wanted Grace to get a surprise like that because the old girlfriend showed up. And so I think it's best to be careful too with friendship in general, because if you have a family, it's nice to have some friends, but why do we need like lots and lots and lots of friends? Sometimes you can get in trouble with them, especially if they're having a lot of time that they need to spend, and you're neglecting your own family. That's not very important, and it is not healthy to do that. So now I want to read to you a little bit out of Linda Lichter's book here, Simple Social Graces. And it's a history book, but basically it's not for young people or children. She's pretty explicit when she describes the modern era. She's very critical of the modern male and female relationships, of the modern career women. She's very critical of the moral atmosphere of the world, and she's very praising. She speaks in glowing terms of the previous era, which she calls the Victorian era. During the it was called Victorian era because it was during the reign of Queen Victoria, but it was also extended a little bit into the 1900s. And she was talking about the casualties of how we lost the homemaker, and it's mostly about women. It was about their ways in that day and what made their families happy and strong and what broke them up. And so she says another pivotal first of that era, and she's talking about I'm pretty sure she's talking about the 1960s here, the beginning of convenience foods. She also talked about linens, and she said she had some old linens, made out of linen actually, that she had carried around with her for years, and one day was looking at them and wondering who made them and why they were so important to these Victorian people. And she covered a whole chapter on what the meaning of these linens were, like tablecloths and other types of coverings for the furniture and your bath things and your bedroom things. And she did a whole chapter on what they signified and why they were so important to them. And she said, Victorian children didn't buy their meals from a vending machine or a small food court. They earned them through doing their part, and by being part of something that transcended the food on their plates. Every child should have some specific duty to the progress of the meal, noted Mary Welch in her cookbook, which was typical in dispensing general advice along with the recipes. They will early come to enjoy and be proud of the perfect smoothness of all the routines of a well-ordered table. Now, as I explained to you before, there was a book by Stormy O'Meriton called Better Health God's Way, in which she had a section on food, on how when you see it from the garden to the table, how other senses in your body are used to digest that food. The sight and the smell of it, and then the preparation and the cooking and the sitting and the dining all had a part in your digestion. And it was very interesting. If you can ever get a hold of that book, Greater Health God's Way. And so this is pretty much what she's talking about here. She said instead of having a ready-made piece of food, a child had something to do with the process of it. He probably had to go and work in the garden for part of his childhood. Family meals were intended to teach children both obedience to parental authority and the selflessness of assisting younger siblings. Along with the basic table manners and conversational habits they would carry beyond the home, they learned to appreciate and emulate the efforts of a meal, prepared and presented in a clean and pleasant atmosphere. which they were obliged to reflect in their conduct and personal appearance. All this took time and work, but the Victorians knew there was no free lunch. You always get what you pay for, and we paid plenty for living on the cheap. In the half-baked nod to the importance of baking bread together, a TV public service ad announces, if you want better kids, you've got to be better parents. This announcer pleads for one family dinner a week at the kitchen table, which is shown surrounded by empty chairs. Well, I had read that part in the Jane Austen diet, where Brian Kozlowski described the bread of the Regency era and how the bread in the city had been pumped full of chalk and all kinds of things to make it light and fluffy, and how nothing has changed since then, that the commercial bread has always got things in it you really don't need that cause all kinds of problems. The announcer pleads for one family dinner a week at the kitchen table. The Family First Victorians would gasp at this thin-as-gruel formula for bonding and would wonder whether adults who require such instruction should be anyone's parents. They knew that children's habits were formed by habitual contact with parents, not by sporadic meetings. If kids got the Sunday Christian treatment, vice was certain to outrun virtue in the formative years and thereafter. And what they're talking about is where you have your Sunday dinner, but you never see anybody after that. Contrast the mealtime experience of an average working mom today. She is determined to prepare dinner every evening for her year-old son. But a photo of the actual event shows the limits of her good intentions. Instead of sitting at the table, she is crawling under her son's chair to retrieve the food he spilled. And their meals are more or less homemade, yet the table is a littered mess of plastic wrappers, a condiment jar, soda bottles, and a fitting complement. While this rushed middle-class family technically satisfies the quality time, it is hard for the viewer to detect the seeds, no less the fruit of the home spirit. And the rest of it is rather complicated how she writes it. You'd really have to study this. Without the living cultural memory of that intensely domestic past, we are left trying to spice a stew that needs something else we cannot name because it has become so foreign to our modern palate. And it just behooves all of us to try to restore that by having... She mentioned in this book that the way to restore it all is that every family had a way of cooking, and they felt or tasted it to see if it was quite right, and so that not everything would have the same taste. I know in my family, if I make a lovely soup, everyone's awfully sad because they'll never taste it again because the next one will be so different. If you make it from the original ingredients and you're seasoning it and cooking it a certain way, it just depends on what time of year it is. It depends on a lot of things, but each one has its own unique taste. And I suppose each family would have their own unique dishes that they made. And when I say dishes, I don't mean you actually eat the dishes. That's the word cup, dish, teacup. When you say, would you like a cup of tea? I was looking that up the other day, and it's a type of speech. It's a figure of speech where the contents, the container is used to indicate the contents. And so, you say, she makes such a nice dish, or we tasted her dish, and it's a figure of speech. And it's like, would you like a cup of tea? Doesn't mean they actually drank the actual physical cup, but what was in it. I just wanted you to know that because it's going to come to something someday, I'm pretty sure. And now I'm reading from Helen Andelin. Did I read this to you already? Where she talked about how the homemaker honors her position in the home. She looks upon the career in the home as the most important career in the world. I would discourage you from thinking it as a career because kind of takes the heart out of it. Creating a happy marriage and family life and raising honorable children are the greatest contributions she can make, even though she does nothing more than live her daily life. And I love that phrase, live your daily life. Do nothing more than live your daily life. You don't have to be a great this or a great that. Just live your daily life, what needs to be done. Even though, and how little credit I think our mothers and grandmothers ever got for any of that, the amount of work that they went to just to live their daily life and to make a home for all of us. There should be a lot more honoring emphasized for that effort that they do. Even though she does nothing more than live her daily life, if she does it well, it is of immeasurable value. No success compares to the success of the home. And that is something that could be dwelled on and could be expounded upon a lot more. So now I get to read from A Stepping Heavenward by Elizabeth Prentice. And this is a way also to learn. If you're a late bloomer and you've never been homeschooled, it's never too late. You could start your diary. You could get yourself a very pretty book and just start your diary, because you get an idea from reading this as to what you would enter into it. And she writes about how frustrated she is with herself, when she exhibits poor character, when she's impatient, and that's okay. But then she also writes about how she overcomes things, and she has recently met someone. She's a caregiver. This is a good diary of a caregiver, because she's at home with her mother, but her sister has children. Her mother's sister has children. Her auntie has children. So when they get ill, she goes over there to help look after them. And often the doctor has to be called to check on to see how they are. And so her aunt has to have a talk with her once, because Dr. Elliot is a young man who likes her, but she has rejected him. He doesn't meet up to everything that she, I guess, expects. And so she has a talk with her and says there's more to him than you realize. And so I want to read a little bit about her. And she has several people that talk to her. And they're all very, very concerned because she doesn't have her eyes open about this young man. But one person said, and I wrote this quote down because I liked it so much. One person said to her, looking at her life as a caregiver, she's constantly caring for her own mother's children, or the younger children, or her aunt's children. And she said, have you not thought about your future and about being married and having your own family? And she said, life is not meant to be spent on a treadmill. And how many people have convinced, even us who are vital, went through years where someone was trying to convince us not to go ahead with our lives, but to stay on the treadmill, stay with this job. And if you stay with this job 20 years, you'll get this and you'll get that and the other thing. And but I loved that quote, life is not meant to be spent on a treadmill, to get her out of her box that she's put herself in, where her life has no more goals or hope other than taking care of other people's homes. And so I want to read to you a couple of entries from chapter 10. And I would say chapter 7 would be the one that would be of most interest to a young lady if she wants to find out more about this young man. And she wasn't really impressed with him. He wasn't very smooth. He was kind of, she thought he was awkward and not very refined. But let's read on here. September 5. This has been a delightful summer for me. To be sure, we had to take the children to the country for a couple of months. But Ernest's letters were almost better than Ernest himself. Now, I believe this doctor's name is Ernest Elliot. I have written enough to him to fill a dozen books. Now, I believe I read his first letter to her. previously. We are going back to the city now. In his last letter, Ernest says he has been home and that his mother is delighted to hear of our engagement. She says, too, that he went to see an old lady, one of the friends of his boyhood, to tell the news to her. I was going to find out if I could see what happened before this that I didn't read aloud to you. When I told her, he goes on, that I had found the most beautiful, the noblest, the most loving of human beings, she only said, "Of course, of course. Now you know, dear, that is not all, of course, but the very strangest and most wonderful event in the history of the world." And then he described a scene he had just witnessed at the deathbed of a young girl my own age, who left this world and every possible earthly joy with a delight in going to be with Christ that made him sound eloquent. Oh, how glad I am that God has cast in my lot with a man whose whole business is to minister to others. I'm sure this will of itself keep him unworldly and unselfish. How delicious it is to love such a character, and how happy I am to go with him to the sick rooms and the dying beds. He has already taught me that lesson learned in such scenes. And now, my dear old journal, let me tell you a secret that has to do with life and not with death. I am going to be married. To think that I am always going to be with Ernest, to sit at the table with him every day, to pray with him, to go to church with him, and have him all mine. I am sure there is not another man on earth whom I could love as I love him. The thought of marrying someone else, I mean of having that silly schoolgirl engagement end in marriage, was always repugnant to me, but I give myself to Ernest joyfully and with all my heart. How good God has been to me! I do hope and pray that this new attachment will not detach itself. If I knew it would, I would have the courage to cut it off. Yesterday was my birthday, and today is my wedding day. We meant to celebrate the one with the other, but Sunday would come this year on the 15th. I am dressed and have turned everybody out of this room, where I have suffered so much mortification and experienced so much joy, that before I gave myself to Ernest, before I leave home forever, I may once more give myself away to God. I have been too much absorbed in my earthly love, and am shocked to find how it fills my thoughts. But I will belong to God. I will begin my married life in His fear, depending on Him to make me an unselfish, devoted wife. Now, she goes on to say something that I don't think a lot of people are prepared for, and that is that she thought that she would be able to spend more time with her husband. And this entry says, "Our honeymoon ends today. There hasn't been quite as much honey in it as I expected. I suppose that Ernest would be at home every evening, at least. But now he has got me. He seems satisfied to go out about his business, as if we had been married 100 years. In the morning he goes off to see his list of patients, and he's going in and out all day. And at dinner we sit down and have a nice talk together, and the doorbell invariably rings, and he is called away." And she goes on and on to see how busy he is. Well, that's the way it is, too, with preachers' wives sometimes. And we don't, none of us are prepared, even if it was just someone who was in any other kind of profession. When our daughters get married, they need to learn how to spend their evenings by themselves and what to do, or if they have to spend their days by themselves, what to do. And that's when they can learn to start their diaries, start their quilts, start recording their family history, start their family albums, start sewing and getting interested in a lot of other things, and learn a lot of recipes by heart, so that when the hard times come and the busier times come, you can easily adjust into things. Now, I wanted to talk to you a whole lot more, and my son came over and we were singing that song, "Oh Sacred Heart," because we both like the Bach music, and we're looking at some of the words in it. And there was a phrase I've got to remember to put this on for you to listen to while you do dishes or something. And it was, "O Sacred Heart, Head Now Wounded, with shame and grief weighed down." And there was part in the chorus that said, "How does that visage language which once was bright as morn?" So we had to look up the word visage, which meant the features on your face, and language meant to be pulled down or to lag. And it's always good, if you are raising children, to teach them the words in these songs so they understand them. And don't ever suspect that all you have to do is just to be a nice mother and a homeschooler and just take them to church on Sunday and they'll be okay spiritually, because you have to teach them everything. You can't depend on the church to do that. It can't fulfill all of your needs, because it is not as distinct and as detailed as you could be at home for your children, for your own children. You know their needs, and you need to teach them the Bible and good character and the songs, so that you have these moments at home are so rich, so that when you do go to church, you're not disappointed, because you know you can just come home and you can study all the things that you wish they had talked about, or that and you could have it your way at home. So you can't ever depend on anybody else to raise your children or to make you a Titus 2 woman. You will have to do it yourself, and it takes self-discipline. And the only way to have self-discipline is to ask God to help you and to determine a few things to do, and then go see if you can do them, whether you feel like it or not. So ladies, until I see you again, also, if you would like to leave a comment, you can go over to the blog where this is embedded. You're welcome to leave a comment there. You can also email me your comment if you want, or just email me. And until I see you again, I hope you'll stay close to Christ. And talk to you later. Bye.